Hello everyone, and welcome to Unleashing the Power of AI in Your Job Search. I'm Zoe, the Programme Design Manager at the CIPD Trust, and at the CIPD Trust we're all about sharing the expertise of people who work in HR, learning and development, and ED&I. And these webinars are one of the ways that we give insights into how you can jumpstart your job search and stand out when you're looking for work by sharing the thoughts of our amazing kind of panelists. So a couple of housekeeping things to begin with. We're recording this session, but cameras and microphones have been disabled, so you won't appear on the recording. But please use the chat to ask questions and make comments, and just be aware that we might read those out on the recording, so just don't put anything in that you don't want shared. A couple of my colleagues, Ali and Resone, will be posting useful tips and links in the chat, and if we have time, we'll answer some questions from the chat towards the end, so do share any questions that you might have. So today we're going to be talking about artificial intelligence and automation in job searching and recruitment. And this is a topic that we always get questions about. And we've got Konstantinos and Attica here to share their insights. So I think we'll have a really great discussion. There's a lot of value that generative AI might bring to your job search, but we need to find ways to use it that are right for you. And the same is true for how companies use AI and automation in their systems. So we'll talk a bit about how that works and how you can use that knowledge to your advantage. So let's go ahead and hear from our speakers. Konstantinos, do you want to tell us a bit about yourself and what your experience with AI and automation is?
Amazing. Thank you, Zoe. And thank you very much for having us here today in this event. We are really excited and looking forward to share our experiences and knowledge on this topic. So I'm Konstantinos Tassis, Learning and Development Programs Manager. I work for Ipsos UK and Ireland. And the past couple of years, I have been massively involved into embedding generative AI for Ipsos UK and Ireland. I start kind of being exposed into this technology around 3 to 4 years ago. And the first impression that I had, it was just wow, it was mind-blowing. The idea that you can teach a system something and the system can use this knowledge in order to produce some outcome, it was just a mind-blowing process. Now, of course, things has been improved massively, and Gen AI has been one of the main tools that we use for Ipsos UK and Ireland, and I'll be more than happy to share all that I know about this and how this technology can support your process of getting a new job.
Fabulous. And Attica, let's hear from you.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thank you for making time for us today. Really glad to be here. I'm Attica Amalina. My preferred pronouns are she, her. I'm a senior program manager for diversity, equity, and inclusion in Amazon. I manage Europe, Middle East, and Africa programs. And I was previously at Google. So these two companies have really been at the forefront of AI over the past decade. And so it's been really interesting to see the back end work that's been happening, but also to then use it in our day-to-day lives. I'm also a certified life coach where I specialize on career coaching and life coaching for women in their middle and early career professionals. And so I also use AI with them to try and leverage the power to expand on our own personal human touch. So really excited to be sharing tips from all of those areas.
Great, excellent. Thank you both. That's really helpful. So the first thing we're going to do is ask a question to our lovely audience, and hopefully this should appear as a sort of poll. So our question is, how familiar are you all with generative AI tools? Is this something that you use a lot? Is it something that you've kind of never used, or you're not familiar at all? So if you just pop your kind of answers in. Oh, I see we've got quite a range here. So already we're seeing people have heard about them but not used them. Some people are a bit more familiar. So that's really great because I think what we're going to do today is hopefully talk a bit about how you can use those to your advantage. And I think some of my colleagues will have some links to pop in the chat about where you can find some of these tools if you're not quite sure, although it sounds like most people have at least heard of them. I don't think we've got. So great. Excellent. So we've got some questions that have come through when you all registered for this webinar. So I guess we'll just kick off with those. So the first one is, how can I use AI to personalize my job application materials, such as CVs and cover letters, to match specific roles? And I wonder, Konstantinos, if you want to take this to start with.
Yes, of course. And from where to start? So many to say about this topic, actually. I think it is safe, and taking consideration that, as I just saw on the poll, that 38% of you say that you have heard about this, but you haven't familiarized yourself with this technology. I will start answering this question by starting from the very basics, such as what do we include in a CV? My recommendation to you is, in your CV, you need to include 4 elements. You need to include your professional skills, your professional knowledge, your professional behaviors, and your key achievements from the roles you have covered in the past. Now, technology, generative AI, is here to improve productivity and efficiency. It's here to support you in the way that you construct your CV. It is not here to replace you or to create an avatar for you. So I will say, as a first step for someone who is currently looking for a new job, take a piece of paper, take a pen, and write down some bullet points of what are your professional skills, your professional knowledge, what are the professional behaviors that express yourself, and what are the key achievements. Then I will recommend you to add those bullet points into any generative AI system. I've been using a lot ChatGPT, so you may hear me referring to ChatGPT, but you can use anything that you feel familiar to you, and ask the system to turn those bullet points into some paragraphs on some more comprehensive bullet points that you can use for your CV. I would say that's a good start of how you can use this technology.
That's great. Particularly love that we're doing a session on AI and automation, and your first bit of advice is take a pen and paper. I think that's always good to hear. I'm a big fan of pen and paper. I think that's always a great place to start. Attica, I wonder if you had anything to add onto that, or what you might think of as like the next step once you've done that.
Yes, definitely. I think to Konstantinos' point, it's very important that we leverage AI as a tool that makes things better, right? It is not the starting point. It is supposed to be the coach. It is supposed to be the refiner. It is supposed to be the ones that help you catch things that you may not necessarily know, right? So a big part of I'm assuming like the audience today is you're working with either from an underrepresented background, or maybe you're not as privileged to get access to certain resources or certain connections. So an AI tool is actually a tool that can help you bridge that gap, right? So one of the things that I love to do with AI is to get AI to think or act like something. So I'll give you an example, right? So the way AI works is you have to give them good prompts. And that's the magic of AI. If you don't give good prompts, you're not going to be able to get good things out of it, right? So if you give a generic question, it will give you a generic answer. So whenever you want to use AI to personalize, so to Konstantinos' point, you need to write everything down, do like a brain dump of everything, right? Because you need to feed this back into AI, right? So what I would do is, after you've kind of written it out down, put it into a Word document, rephrase it, put it into bullet points and things like that, then what I would do is, when you find a job description that you want to apply for, right? You need to personalize all of your CVs. When you find a job description you apply for, what you can do, and this is a prompt that you can do, right? Act as a hiring manager or act as a recruiter, for example. And then you say, act as a recruiter or act as a hiring manager that is hiring for this role. Then you paste the job description, right? And then you say, review and, please create a CV for me based on your input, right? Whatever your description, your experience, your achievement is, and create a CV that will make the hiring manager or the recruiter think I am viable for this role. So that is an example, right? You need to input things into AI, and then AI will feed it back to you. So remember your prompts. So yeah, a great prompt that I really like is act as a hiring manager, act as a recruiter. This is what I want you to create for me. So that's one thing in terms of using AI to personalize your job application materials. Another way that I really like to work with AI is to call out gaps, right? So for example, ask AI, right? Review this job description, review my CV. What are some gaps in my CVs that I should work on, right? Or recommend some improvements to my CV. So then AI will tell you, right? Either like give more data points, give more numbers, give more like achievements and things like that. And then so that is how I would say leverage AI, because I think that's the part where a lot of people miss, is that it's such a powerful tool, but we don't know how to use it. So those are like very quick tips that I can give.
Great, excellent. And I guess carrying on from that, Attica, so the next question that we have are about what are the best ways to use AI in interviewing. So I guess that's kind of interview preparation, isn't it? And like how you can get ready. So do you have any for in a similar way for people who are kind of who've got that interview? How do they prepare using generative AI?
Yes. So exactly to my point earlier about taking on a persona, right? Or asking AI or ChatGPT or whatever to take on a persona. I basically have a conversation with ChatGPT. I'd be like, sometimes I even say, hi, ChatGPT, and thank you, ChatGPT, because that's a whole thing. So I say, hi, ChatGPT, I've gotten an interview for this role, paste the job description, please act as a hiring manager and recommend or suggest 5 different interview questions for me to prep for. And then see that it will come up and then you prep for it accordingly, right? So that is really one of the best ways to use AI. One of the things, and this is just a shout out because this is something that we've noticed in recruitment a lot, is you do not use AI while you are interviewing. Because some people, and what we have noticed more in the recruitment kind of landscape is that, as we are having interviews, especially if it's virtual interviews, you can see someone typing and reading off a screen. So don't do that because it's very obvious and you'll be caught out. So what you want to do is you want to use it as something that you prep for and practice for, and this is not AI, this is for all interview tips. Make sure that you prepare your interview answers in a particular format. I completely forgot the format right now. But
is it the star format, right?
Yes,
that's normally
format. Yeah, you really need to do it in a star format because that's how you present yourself in the best way. Ultimately, at the end of the day, if you think about an interview and job application, is they're trying to figure out that you can do the job. You have the experience to do the job, you have the capability to do the job, and that you can actually do the job. And also, a lot of the times is to assess whether or not you're someone that they can work with, essentially, right? All of that can't be used through AI. That is you preparing, right? So use AI as a coach, use AI as an additional thing that will make you better, but ultimately also have faith in yourself and work on the things that you can control.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And just for those of you who aren't familiar with the STAR format, that is, so you frame your answers in a way that you talk about the situation you were in, the task that you had to do or that you did, the actions that you took, and then the result. So it's that kind of taking people through that journey of what happened and how you responded to it and what result that was, so that you can really show what your achievements are. Konstantinos, I wonder if you've got any thoughts about that, kind of how you prep for interviews and using AI to kind of help you with some of that. And I guess also on to Attica's point about not just regurgitating the answers that it's giving you. How can people use that to their best advantage?
I can't stress enough the point Attica mentioned about just ensuring that you don't just use what you get from the system. It is extremely important, and I guess that later on we're gonna discuss about challenges the business, the employers are facing, and this is very much related. So it is very important for all of us when we use AI systems to be authentic, honest, and to ensure that whatever it is stated in our CV, for example, it 100% represents our skills, knowledge, and behaviors. The technology is there to help us, to support us. For example, English is not my first language. I do use generative AI every single day to improve the grammar of the emails that I send, to improve the text of various communications I send out. But always I ensure that the ideas and the content belongs to me. And I think that's important. Now, regarding another way you can use Gen AI to have a better preparation for interview stage is when I'm mentoring people that they try to find a job, I always explain to them that a preparation for you to find a job is split into two big parts. There is the part where you need to create your CV in a constructive way that represents the best who you are, and then there is another part where where you need to prepare your presentation skills, your speaking and listening skills, because eventually employer will call you to an interview stage and you will need to articulate this in a clear way. Now, I remember myself that before AI, I used to recommend to my mentees, go and find a friend, go and find a family member, sit down and practice, 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 practice. The more that you practice, the more confident you become, the more ready you will be to answer any possible questions you will be asked. Well, now we have the privilege to have Gen AI. We can ask Gen AI to pretend to be tougher, softer, more challenging, anything that we want. So right now we have the ability to sit in front of our laptop, ask generative AI to take the form of employer that we believe matches the job that we have applied for and start practicing with the system. And the system will also provide us feedback on this, which is a great benefit, I think.
Yeah, I think it's great for that. That kind of just getting that practice in, isn't it? Can really just help get your brain into the right mindset. It's interesting. I sometimes refer to ChatGPT as my friend ChatGPT. So I suppose when you're saying go and find friends to interview practice with, I'm sort of thinking like, oh yeah, that's the kind of thing. Oh, I can see we've had a question come in, which I think we might just go to straight away. So can Attica elaborate on the type of prompts that you could use for gaps in the CV? So you mentioned that you might put your CV through and say, where are the gaps? What kind of things might you be asking for there? Oh, you've muted yourself.
Yeah, that was my cat. My cat is on. That's a great question. So an example could be exactly that. So in terms of, dear ChatGPT, please act as a hiring manager reviewing this CV. And then you put the job description and then you put the CV and then say to ChatGPT, please identify the gaps in the CV that I need to work on. So give them maybe a number. Please identify 3 to 5 gaps in the CVs based on the job description that I should work on. And then ChatGPT will be able to churn out the answer, and then you'll be able to identify that.
Great. Yeah, thank you. So we've got our next question, which I think we've covered a bit of, but I guess it'd be interesting to get a few more thoughts on, which is how can I use AI to stand out in the job application process? So Konstantinos, do you maybe want to take this first?
Yeah, that's quite interesting actually. And actually this is also related to what Attica mentioned about the prompts. It's quite interesting, actually, that in the last World Economic Forum that took place a few months ago, it was discussed that one of the biggest challenges we are facing, employees facing these days, is our expression. The so much technology that has surrounded us has weakened has weakened our expression, which has created a challenge for us. And the real challenge is that if we don't express ourselves clearly with the generative AI technology, we will not get the results that we expect from the technology. So it's important to start thinking about this skill and start working on this skill and practicing with the system. Now, once that we start feeling familiar of how to use and get the most out of this technology, I will recommend one easy way for you to maximize the use of it is by creating your CV and asking the system to highlight your skills, knowledge, behaviors, and key achievements, ideally with different colors. There are Gen AI systems that they can provide images and colors. They can do this job. So once that you have this picture, straight away, you're going to visualize the challenges you are facing in your CV so you know where to focus. While before Gen AI, we really didn't have this ability and we were relying very much on other people's opinion, while now we have a machine that can do this for us faster and easier. That's just one easy example that just came to my mind.
And Attica, do you have any thoughts about how people might be able to make themselves stand out or make their application stand out using generative AI?
Yeah, so based on everything I said earlier, what do you think? I'm sorry, I used to be a teacher, so I'll go back the question to everyone in terms of it's basically to identify that and prompt that to the Gen AI tool, right? And be like, how can I make sure that I stand out? One of the things, actually, to go back to also Constantina's earlier point in terms of resumes, right, is there are actually really important things that we forget, and it's basic things like grammar, like formatting, like things like that you actually could just ask Gen AI to please reformat this in the best way. It's to check for grammatical errors. It's to make sure that it's clearly read, because actually those are the things, because on average, a recruiter or a hiring manager spends only 7 seconds screening through a resume, right? So you want to make sure that your resume stands out from the very beginning in terms of the formatting is clear. You want to make sure your top achievements, your top most relevant points is at the very top, so that it prompts them to read even more. So those are the kind of things that I would recommend using Gen AI for.
Excellent. Yeah, that's really great. I think that that's super helpful, just getting those kind of basics right. I think it's you kind of forget that that's one of the most useful uses for this kind of technology, isn't it? Is just saying, oh, actually, is this a good format? Is this a bit dense and difficult to read? So yeah, so our kind of our next question is almost the kind of opposite of this, of how can you use generative AI when most job adverts are, and they've put this in quotes, against it, which I think is about when you see job adverts that say, without using generative AI, please tell us about your skills and experience. So is there a way that people can use generative AI in those situations without kind of, going against the spirit of what's being asked there, but maybe in ways that can help them? And also, how can people make sure that it's something individual to them, that they're not just regurgitating ChatGPT's responses? Attica, do you want to start off with that?
Yeah, definitely. One of the things that I think people fail to realize is we see so many resumes that we know if it's copy pasted from somewhere. So now there are certain bots or certain systems that will shoot out 1,000 different applications a week for someone that's not kind of amended, that's not edited, and things like that, right? So when we say job adverts are quote unquote against it, it means we don't want to see things that are just copy pasted, that has no true view of you as a person, that has no direct linkages to the job actually being advertised, that has no real value to it, right? And I think Constantino's earlier in the earlier part mentioned that we're trying to assess whether or not you can do the job, whether or not you have the experience relevant to the job, and so when we say it's against it, we're against basic kind of resumes that's just being regurgitated. Like we want to see you in your resume and your experience. So use it to your benefit.
Yeah, absolutely. Konstantinos, do you have anything to add to that?
100%. I absolutely agree with this statement. I think it's important to start by saying, all right, why some companies say that we should not use ChatGPT or generative AI during the application process? Well, the truth is that this technology is so powerful to the state that it can create for us an avatar. It can create for us another personality that doesn't match to who we are. That's a very big threat for the businesses, for the employers, for the candidates as well, quite frankly, because there is a performance question whether when you recruit someone who says that has these professional skills, knowledge, and behaviors, but when they come to the job, actually they don't have this performance, knowledge, skills, and behavior. So the candidate will be in a very stressful situation because they will be asked to deliver something that they don't know how to do it. Also, the companies will be in an uncomfortable situation because they know that they haven't recruited the person who were expecting that they were recruiting. So that's the main point why a lot of organizations these days they say mind the use of Gen AI. I saw on one of the comments here in this chat say that some recruiters they may take 7 minutes to scan CV. I'm gonna say some recruiters they may take 7 seconds to scan your CV. So, and this can be simple because your CV is more than 2 pages. Some companies they do have these policies. We don't want more than 2 pages CV. So straight away, as a recruiter, I open your CV, I see 3 or 4 pages. See you later. Next one. I'm not even reading the CV. So this is a way that ChatGPT can help you in constructing your CV. You can get different ideas how you can form the words. You can get different ideas how to match the paragraphs about the length. You can face some information important about the organization. You can even add your CV into ChatGPT, for example, also include the job description for the role that you want to apply and ask ChatGPT to make, not to create, but to make recommendations to you what you can do to improve your CV. So on one hand, you have an advisor who is your personal assistant. And on the other hand, you are able to create your own CV that matches, that reflects who you are, and you can have this open, honest, and authentic conversation with your future employer.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right, isn't it? And you mentioned maybe using generative AI to like do a bit of research on the employers. I would say like that's fine, definitely do that, but don't neglect doing your own research because those models are not always super up to date, and you might find that I'm sure we've seen examples of it regurgitating stuff that's either not quite true or is a few years out of date, and you don't want to get caught out looking like you kind of haven't done your research when you have. So yeah, do just go on a company's website and spend a few minutes doing your own research. It's always the best advice. Right, we've got another question for the audience now, I think. So when you all have been applying for jobs, have you been tailoring your CV and cover letter to match the job description? I think this is always an interesting question because we know that it's always given as the best advice, but I think knowing from experience when you're job searching, sometimes you just want to get a few applications out there and see if you get anything. So I can see that we're getting a bit of a range. So some people are on the always thing. That's really good to see, as about half of you. And then we've got sometimes really good to see that no one has selected never yet. But yeah, I can see that we're pretty split between always doing it and sometimes doing it, which I think is probably about right in terms of how most people approach it. So the reason why we wanted to have this question is because tailoring your CV and cover letter can be one of the best ways to get through recruitment systems. It's one of the best ways to get recruited anyway, but particularly if you're thinking about getting through those automated systems, getting those keywords in is super helpful, which I guess brings us on to our next question, which is how and why do employers use artificial intelligence and automation in recruitment? And Attica, do you want to start off with this? I'm sure you can kind of talk about some examples that you've seen.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, just now earlier we mentioned, a recruiter or a hiring manager uses an average 7 seconds to actually review a CV and see whether they go on to the next one and things like that. When we think about companies, a big priority is efficiency. It's about time and hours saved. It's about resourcing saved. So whenever we go into automation, that's actually the primary driver. We want to save time, we want to save money, we want to be as efficient as possible, right? If you are thinking in any single role, I think a couple of days ago, I saw this stat kind of flying around. Right now, in tech roles, for example, for every single job opening, we get close to 1,000, 1,500 like applications in big tech, for example. You can imagine we would not be able to do a review of each and every single one of them, right? So when we use automation systems, it is to make it efficient for us. And it's so that as recruiters or people in the recruiting team, we leverage the human touch, the experiences and the moments that rely heavily on the human touch, which is on prep calls, it's on actually getting to know the candidates, is to actually do the interview process, right? So automation happens usually at the top of the funnel so that we can heavily emphasize on the human touch along the way. Please don't quote me on the number, Ellie. Like it was something that I saw flying around the other, once. But it is a lot of number per job opening. It's just a review of the current job market right now. So that is why we would say that's the primary reason why we do it. It's not because we're lazy. It's just because we're dealing with scale and a lot of huge numbers. And also some companies, especially smaller companies, don't actually have their own HR teams. Right? They don't actually have their own recruitment teams. So they work with agencies, and agencies work with many different employers. So there's a lot of things around efficiency and speed that we're working with. That is primarily why I think automation happens. So just to give that kind of like background understanding.
Yeah, that's great. And I think even I'm sure those numbers sound about right to me. I think I've heard similar in quite a few different sectors. I think the important thing to remember is that there are still people getting jobs, and it's important not to rule yourself out by not applying, because then you definitely won't get the job. So it's that even though those numbers sound a bit scary, I think you've just got to keep going, haven't you? And people do get hired into jobs, so it's important to kind of keep that positivity up. Konstantinos, did you? Oh no, go on, Attica. Sorry.
Just to that point as well. Exactly, in terms of don't self-reject, but also be strategic and smart about how you apply, which is actually what we're trying to talk about today in terms of how do you leverage AI to make sure that you're putting the best self forward and not some random bot-generated CV that's not tailored to the role, that wouldn't go through ATS systems and things like that, right? So if you feel that you're qualified for the job, then apply for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one thing I would also say is that all those systems are different. They're all set up differently. So there's no like, if you feel like, oh, I got rejected there, it's like super important to like just keep going, because that doesn't mean that a different company will be looking for different things. They'll have their systems set up differently, even if it's the same system, which you can sometimes tell, can't you? You see all the kind of little acronyms going up and you think, oh yeah, I've applied through this before. It doesn't mean that it's set up in the same way, and it could be working differently. Konstantinos, I wondered if you had anything to add about how kind of people can sort of think about the way that automation and AI is happening in recruitment.
Yes, I mean, why we have this system in the recruitment? Super easy, straightforward for everyone to understand about that. 2 words: efficiency and productivity. That's all about. Especially when we talk about the private organizations, the main goal is to find the best candidate with using as less resources as possible, because a lot of resources cost a lot of money to the businesses. So we do use generative AI technologies to ensure that we are able to reach out to the best person as soon as we can. However, I may also flag that because this technology is at the early stage of becoming commercial and more organizations start using it in various people's practices, still the most of the people's practices practitioners, they become quite conscious, and still our biggest concern is that we will use this technology to scan through various CVs and try to identify the best candidate, but we want to have full control. Human must have full control of this selection process. Computer and generative AI, at least at this stage, I don't know what's going to happen in a few years, but at least at this stage, should not and will not replace the human element about the selection process.
Yeah, I think that's super important. And I think, like Attica was saying earlier, sometimes you have those systems in order that you can get to the human bit quicker, right? That you can make sure that, you know, you're not having a person sifting through 900 CVs and getting really fed up, but actually the person gets to do the bits that a person is best at, right? Which I think is what's so important about how we use these systems. So our next question is, how do employers reduce the risk of losing the right applicant when they're using these systems? I think, Attica, that you've looked at this a bit, haven't you, in your kind of DE&I work around how we can avoid those systems kind of rejecting people who might be the right applicant.
Yeah, exactly. So one of the key things is that this is a really important point to say, is that decisions aren't being made, like key important decisions aren't being made by AI, right? The top of the funnel, where we are getting resumes and we're filtering through them, right? It will filter according to the boundaries and the systems that you're saying, right? It's filtered through whether or not they've meet the job description, whether they have the keywords in the job description as well, whether they have experience, years of experience, all of those kind of things are filtered through, and we make sure that those key data points are being met, right? So the right person for the job will have all of those things in their CV, right? And so I think it's really important when we are positioning ourselves in our CV that we are hitting all of those things very clearly in the CV itself, right? Which is why don't use weird fonts. Don't make, I know Canva is this whole big thing right now, but sometimes Canva actually might not work with ATS because the ATS can't read Canva CVs, right? Sometimes a Word document is actually the best thing. So it's important to recognize that, when we say it's the right applicant, it is the best applicant for the role, is the one that has all of the necessary experience, has all the necessary skills, can do the job well, right? That's the best person for the role. And then what we do in terms from a DI perspective is we make sure that we build systems and tackle the barriers to entry where underrepresented groups, are not necessarily there. So we actually do outreach programs. We make sure that people are aware of the roles that we're actually hiring for. So there are definitely barriers and, there are definitely programs and strategies to make sure that we are as inclusive and building a diverse pipeline as possible. So those are the things that we just want to make sure that people are aware.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point, and I think Canva is it can be a bit of I know you can make beautiful things in it, but they are not always that easy to read or understand. So yeah, I would definitely agree with you there. Interestingly, I asked ChatGPT some stuff about this webinar, and one of the things it came back with like multiple times was like, just format your CV so it's really clear. Like it just that formatting is actually like super important for these things, but it doesn't, like, it's better to be simple than doing something totally jazzy. And Konstantinos, did you have any thoughts about that how organizations use these systems to kind of find the right applicant? And
yeah, to my knowledge, a lot of organizations use this system for their recruitment process, but still, because there are so many things that they're quite challenging, and we have identified them as kind of the weaknesses of the system, such as a very big thing is the bias. What's the bias of the selection process when you use Gen AI? And there is no clear answer, at least to myself right now. So because of this and other big challenges that we have identified, to my knowledge, if not all, the most of the organizations, they do use generative AI system in a soft way. We do not rely on the system to find out for us the correct candidate. We may ask the support of the system to scan the CVs that we receive in a very basic way, in a way that we know that it will exclude some quite of extreme cases that people they just send CV without having a particular interest into this specific position, or without even presenting the very basic skills that we have asked for it, but that's all. We very much still rely on human person. We very much rely on human eyes who will check those CVs, and humans are the people who will make the final decisions, not the technology. And I say again, to that day, because we heard so much about this technology, which quite honestly, we don't know how it will be the situation in a week time or in a month time.
Yeah, I mean, who knows? Maybe we'll be running this webinar next year and it'll just be all AI will be doing it. We can just be sitting at home. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I think certainly from the CIPD, when we're advising people, we would always say to, use these systems with caution and don't outsource your responsibility to them. You are the people who are doing the hiring, so don't let the system do the hiring for you, because the system doesn't have to deal with the consequences. And I think that's generally how most organizations are using these, is that they, it's a helpful tool, but ultimately those decisions get made by people, because it's people who are best able to know who's going to be right in their organization. Great. So we've got our next question is, how else can I use generative AI to keep me on track in my job search? So obviously we've talked a bit about using it to practice for interviews and create CVs and things, but what other ways could people use it to kind of keep on track while they're looking for work? Attica, do you want to take that?
Yeah, this is a really interesting question, right? Because I think I'm going to take this slightly differently in terms of on track, in terms of tracking the system. One of the things, especially if you are quite early on in your career, is that you actually don't know what are the available jobs out there beyond what your limited knowledge is, right? Because especially if you're a first-gen graduate, or or if no one really around you can talk to you about, hey, these are the different options beyond doctor, lawyer, accountant, and things like that. One of the things that AI is really good at is to actually brainstorm and suggest careers and jobs for you based on your prior experience, based on your passion, based on your interests. Right. And this has been really interesting because, and I especially noticed this from like I said, first-gen graduates or people who don't have family members who work in corporate before, things like that, is what we do is, and this is another prompt that I can share, is like act as a career coach and review my experience, my CV, and my interests. And then you put it all out. Recommend 3 to 5 jobs or careers for me. And then you will see. And sometimes, when I've done this with some of my coachees, they didn't even realize that there were these roles available, right? Like business intelligence engineer, data analyst, and all of those kind of things. It's just because we don't know what we don't know. And so going back to the point of using AI as a tool to expand our knowledge is to ask them to be a career coach, right? Like, what are the kind of available roles out there? And so that could be a really interesting in terms of tracking your job search, because sometimes we think we only have this particular career path, or there's only this term. Another important prompt is, I am interested in insert job title. What are some of the other job titles that other companies use? Because I can tell you there are so many job titles that actually talk about the same thing. Or there's job titles that sound similar but have very different job descriptions, right? So that is one way that I found really, really helpful for people trying to expand their job search. I think tracking my job search, if in the tracking nature of the word, I always like an Excel sheet because there's nothing can take away nothing can take that away from Excel.
No, I think that's a great idea. Do you know what? I've heard this advice so many times about using Excel, and I've never once done it because I think it's maybe not for me, but yeah, I think it is really great advice, and it comes up so often. So yeah, that is really, really good. I love the idea of asking other jobs might be good for you, or like, well, I think that's such a good thing. And because there's so much information out there, isn't there? Like, it's easier than ever to research jobs. So that almost gives you like a really great starting point. And then you can go on LinkedIn and do a little bit of like looking around who has these jobs, what jobs did they have before? Like, there's so much out there. It's like, that's such a great way of kind of kicking off any thoughts. Konstantinos, did you have any ideas about kind of using generative AI in different ways in the job search?
Absolutely. I think the Atika's point about just using generative AI as a coach or as a mentor is just excellent. Also, a little bit more practical, we kind of have touched this already, but I think that's important, is that the system can match your CV to a potential application you want to apply for in a very easy way. And I think this is a very smart way of ensuring that every single application that you go through, it's matched with the job description, which gives you a bigger percentage of success through at least the first stage, which is the scanning process of your CV. That's the only big benefit other than coaching and mentoring I can think now.
Yeah, that's really great. And I would add to that actually one thing that there's one thing that sometimes can be just super helpful is if you're feeling a bit like negative about your job search, you can just get ChatGPT to like cheer you up or tell you like positive things, which is kind of, it's just a little bit of code. It's not real, but sometimes that can actually just help click your mindset a little bit and make you feel like, oh yeah, okay, no, I can do this. It's going to be fine. So yeah, I think that's also like just a good little tip if you're feeling a bit down and yeah, you just need a bit of a boost. Great. Okay. We've had a couple of questions come through the chat actually that I think kind of go together. So one of them is, what are the biggest mistakes and errors that you've seen in CVs, which are most likely AI generated? And we've also had one about getting feedback. Like if you don't get an interview, is there a way that you can use ChatGPT or any of those generative AI things to get feedback? So I guess these are kind of similar things just around like, how can you use it in a way that's effective and kind of to help you? Attica, do you have any thoughts on that?
So in terms of the common CV questions, so CV mistakes, was that?
Yeah. Sorry, I kind of merged two questions in one, which probably wasn't very helpful. Common mistakes that like pop up in AI generated things.
So common mistakes is actually, you'll be very surprised about this, is actually weird sentence structures. Like it's very, and once you kind of see enough, you realize that there's actually a very robotic sentence structure that ChatGPT will come out, and then that is when we will know that it's really like copy pasted. It's not a very natural kind of thing. And I say this as a second language speaker as well. It's not necessarily just a first language speaker kind of thing. So being able to see very like awkward sentence structures is very common. Like grammatical errors is really common as well. And then sometimes it's also and bear with me, right? It's sometimes the way that people do is they use big words that really don't mean anything. Because there's this hacking of keywords, right, of JDs, right? They want to put keywords of the JDs in, and then they say they do something, but there's no data point. there is no results, there is no link to their actual job and things like that. It's just literally copy pasted from the JD. So be very careful about that, because ultimately, you want to be true and authentic to yourself and say, like, this is actually what I've done, not this is what I think you want me to see. As well. So that's a really common mistakes of just like very empty sentences as well that doesn't really say anything about what you've done. It's just like copy pasting of keywords. In terms of, I'm going to stop there and see whether Konstantinos has anything to add about common
No,
CV errors.
I totally agree. Absolutely. I totally agree. And I will say that it's super easy to fall off track. And just in one sentence, the system has created something that doesn't really represent who you are. And it doesn't seem authentic. It doesn't seem real. It doesn't seem honest. And it's extremely easy for the system. It does this quite often. So I think that it's important that whatever it has been created by using Gen AI, you go through it word by word and you ensure that every single word express your feeling, express who you are.
Yeah, I think the more that it stops sounding like you, the more it's going to sound like it's Gen AI is the thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
So if it doesn't sound like you, it's probably going to sound like a load of other people who are copy and pasting stuff in. So that's where you need to be a bit careful. Attica, did you have anything else to add?
Not for that common mistake question.
Right.
What was the second question again?
It was about how you might be able to use generative AI to get feedback like post-interview. So if you've had an interview and you know that you didn't get the job, are there ways that you could use generative AI to improve your performance there? Any thoughts? I actually think this is an interesting question, because I would say that the best way to get feedback after an interview is to ask your interviewers. And I think that's something that a lot of people can feel nervous about, but I think it's so common that I would say just do it. Like, don't be afraid, and just go back and say, oh, was there anything I could have improved for next time?
Yeah.
I think
Also, I mean,
yeah.
Sorry, go for it.
Yeah, I think a good starting point for this is the question here is, you are not be called, you are not be asked to pass an interview, or you have been called to pass an interview and then you're not moving to the second stage of this interview. That's two different things. I say this because if recruiters don't even call you, then you need to look into your CV. Now, with my L&D hat, we know that 70% of our ability to communicate with others comes purely from our body language. That represents how difficult it is to express who we are in a piece of paper, to write down and really to be precise and authentic and to ensure that these words really express who we are. It's a difficult task. Now, if you keep sending CVs and you don't get any answer, then you need to do a little bit of work on this stage to ensure that you tweak a little bit the words that represents yourself. Now, on the other hand, if you send the CV, they call you for an interview, but you don't move on, to my personal view, the best you can do is to reach out to those and ask for a feedback and explain to them, be honest with them and explain that I've been asked to pass the first stage of interview few times. I have been declined at this stage all those times that I've been asked to pass it. And I want to progress. I want to improve what kind of holds me back. So please be honest with me and give me honest, constructive feedback. A lot of recruiters will do that. People, and this is one of the good things about the people who work in these kind of people practices, that they work because they want to help others. So if you come across friendly and openly, and it's highly likely that you're going to have the feedback, so you will know what is this that you need to improve and how to work on this skill or behavior that you need to improve.
Yeah, and I think going back to your point, Konstantinos, that you made right at the beginning about, oh, you used to recommend that people do interview practice with their friends, and now it's easier to do it with ChatGPT or whatever. I guess there's still value, isn't there, of doing it with a person and getting that feedback, from other people. So, yeah, it's about that balance. Attica, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I wanted to say that some companies actually have a policy where they can't give feedback. Most big corporations, MNCs, don't have, can't give feedback because there's legal risks and compliance risks as well. So maybe smaller startup companies and things like that might be a bit more prone, or like, let's say it's a very early prep call, then maybe you'll be able to give the feedback. But most companies, I just want to call out that there is a policy that you cannot give feedback. So just demystifying that. Not all companies, but some big MNCs definitely have that, beyond just tech, but also like general kind of MNCs. I think there is an element of, there's a value to things like CIPD Trust kind of programs where you do speed mentoring, speed coaching, speed interviewing, speed, like this one-on-one, like at the end of the day, AI is a tool that's not human. It's also a very flawed tool because people who create it are flawed, right? So nothing actually beats having the one-on-one interaction of having, programs where you meet the people, get the immediate feedback, and then do that coaching. So if you can, like, read, and if you have the opportunity, my kind of first kind of advice is go for that. Like, don't overly rely on AI, but yeah.
Yeah, I think that human touch is still super important, isn't it? Yeah, you can't just do it all from behind your keyboard. Sometimes you do just have to go out in front of people and get their opinions and get their help. Absolutely, no, I think that's absolutely right. And Attika's right. Of course, you're right about not every company will give feedback. A lot of companies will have policies saying that they don't. One thing I would say is that it never hurts to ask. And if you don't ask, you won't know if that's their policy. So, and no one has ever been blacklisted by politely asking for feedback. So yeah, do just go ahead and ask that question. If I mean, sometimes they'll say unfortunately we can't give feedback, and in that case, you're just gonna have to go and find other ways to get that information. But yeah, if there's any room for maneuver, I would definitely just ask, because you've got nothing to lose really at that stage. Great. Well, this has been a great discussion. Thank you all for joining. I think one of my colleagues is going to share our feedback form in the chat. So if you could fill that out, that would be amazing. Let us know what you thought. And if there's anything we can do differently for next time, that would be super helpful. You can give us some feedback. That's always really useful. Yeah, and I guess just quickly, I know we've only got a few minutes, but Attica and Konstantinos, did you just want to share one final kind of thought for people, just to kind of sum up our discussion today? Attica, do you want to go first?
Yeah. I work with so many people who sometimes self-reject because they think it's easier to self-reject than receive rejection. So if there's anything that, I hope you take away from, is that use AI as a tool that will make you better, make everything more efficient, but also have faith in yourself. And if you see anything that you want to apply for, go for it. And then, there's no harm in putting yourself out there. And, if you never say anything, the answer will always be no. So definitely go out there and have faith in yourself.
Yeah, have faith in yourself, I think, is just primo advice. I would give that to anyone. Konstantinos, did you have a final?
Be honest and authentic. That's the best advice I can give. Use the technology to your advantage. The technology is here to support you, to make your life easier, but the technology should not replace who you are. And I think that's a very strong message, that the clearer you make it when you create your CV, and the best way you express this, even when you have conversations with recruiters, I think that's the number one success key to the whole process.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely it. Well, thank you both for speaking, and thank you to our lovely audience for being so great in the chat and coming up with all these amazing questions. And yeah, we'll see you next time towards the end of January for our next webinar. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thanks a lot. Take care.
Thank you.